I'm going to clear up some confusion about the enemies in Sunkenland. Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Devilish Simmer and we're going to be looking into setting up the enemies in Sunkenland. Now there seems to be a bit of confusion about the enemies and how to set them up. So we'll jump into the game and we'll quickly go through all the settings and what they mean. As you can see, when we are in the menu to create a new world in the game, we have a different variety of options. Now we have this section at the top for the enemy. Now of course we've got the enemy's difficulty, which is quite self-explanatory. They're either easy, normal, hard or insane. Now that obviously relates to how easy or difficult they are going to be to defeat them, in the sense of how many there's going to be and how powerful they're going to be. And it also will determine how many hit points it will take them to die. So we're not going to concentrate too much on that one. The bit that is of interest is this next section, which is the Garrison and the raid frequencies. Now the enemy is split into two parts. You have the Garrison and you have the raid. They are two separate things. The Garrison is the enemy that occupy the islands around the map. The raid is the enemy that attack your island. They are not the same. So we'll start with the Garrison amount. The Garrison map, like I've said, occupy the islands around the map. These are what contribute in your factions list of how many islands they occupy and how many enemy there are. Now, as you defeat these enemies and you kill them off, their enemy numbers will go down, and eventually when you have cleared the island out, the island numbers will go down. Now, as I have seen through research and as I have seen myself in game, these numbers do not respawn. Once you have killed the Garrison amount armies and you have cleared out the islands, they are gone. They do not come back. So you can set these on either low, medium or high. This just determines how many enemies in the Garrison there are. All three settings occupy the same islands, but it changes the number of enemies there are. For example, on medium setting, the mutant army have 34 numbers with 4 islands. On hard mode, they still have 4 islands, but they have 51 enemy. So it just ups the amount of enemy. So like I've mentioned, the Garrison enemies are not respawnable. So these are a one-time, kill the enemy, they're gone. So depending on how easy or hard you want to make the game, you can set the level of how many of these enemies you want to battle throughout your game. Now bear in mind that changing this number will not change the difficulty of the army. That is what your army difficulty is for. This level will only change the amount there is, and this amount stays on the islands. Now moving over to the raid frequency. Now the raid frequency is completely different to the Garrison amount. Now these are infinite respawnable enemies. These come out of nowhere. These do not come from the Garrison army and they do not come from the islands. They just respawn in the middle of the water and attack your base. And these are never ending. Now the frequency setting is obviously how frequent they will attack. So you have on this low, medium, high and very high. This will just determine how often are you going to get raided. Again, this will not alter the difficulty of the raids, and it will not alter how strong or powerful the army is. That falls again under the enemy difficulty. This just changes how often you are going to be raided. Also, one other thing with the raid system is because it is a never-ending spawnable system and it does not come from your garrison army and it doesn't come from the enemies on your islands, the raid armies do not contribute to your factions list. So when you are killing the enemies that are raiding you, it will not make a difference to the factions list. The factions list is only relevant to the garrison army, which are the permanent armies that are occupying the islands. Now, both these settings, the garrison and the raid, can be set to none. So in this instance, you will have no enemies. You'll have no enemies in the map, you'll have no enemies on the islands, you'll have no enemies raid you and spawn. So you can have different settings for your game. As we've just discussed, you can turn them both off, which means you'll have no enemies whatsoever. But if you want to have garrison armies on the islands, so when you are fit and ready, you can go and attack them, you can turn your garrison on and you can set it to whatever level you wish. But you will not receive raiders coming to your island. The same in reverse. You can turn the garrison off and all your islands will be empty and your factions list will say you've got no enemies. But if you turn the raid frequency on to whatever setting, randomly you will still get enemies coming to your base or island or whatever you've set up and attack you. And this will be infinite. And lastly, the final one, the survival difficulty, obviously revolves around yourself. That is how easy or difficult it is to survive. So this will affect your status. How many points can you take before you die? How quickly does your oxygen meter run down? How quickly does your food and drink meter run down? Obviously, on easy mode, everything will depreciate slowly and you'll take more hits before dying. And if you go all the way up to hard mode, you will take less hits to die and you will become hungry, thirsty and run out of oxygen much quicker. So I hope that has cleared up a few things about the armies in Sunkenland, and I hope that's helped you to work out how to set the game up a little bit more for yourself and how you want to play. So you can either choose to have no enemy, you can choose to have little bits of enemy, and you can choose different types of enemy. So you can jump in to your game, you can modify your existing files on the game that you are playing to set them up to the way you would like to play, and hopefully you can start making sense of what the different types of army settings do. So until the next one guys, happy surviving!